Work on a sheet of pre-cut watercolor paper. Write your name in the bottom right corner with your block and other identifying information, and flip your paper over. We're going to use a ruler with inches. Leave about 2 inches of space above your ruler. You can just eyeball this. Your paper is about 7 inches wide, so we're going to draw from the number 1 to the number 6. And we're also going to put a mark in the middle. So if we actually have 5 spots, we're going to put a mark at 2.5 inches. Make sure you're counting your spaces. Move your ruler about a ruler's width away. And this time we're going to draw from one edge to the other. We're going to put a mark about at the halfway point, but we're going to connect the top first to make the top of the ring pop. So using our ruler measurements, we're going to put a mark at 3.5. This time you don't have to count the spaces. 1.5 and 5.5. Put our ruler back at the top. We're going to mark about 1/2 inch in, or excuse me, 1 whole inch in from each edge. So then you connect your dots to create the shapes on the top of the ring pop. Draw down to about 5.5 inches. Notice my zeros on the very top line that I drew. We're going to make a 4-inch wide line at the end of this, so put the 2 at the end of your line, and then you're going to draw from 0 to 4. Keep it more or less parallel to the paper as much as you can. We're going to put a mark for our midpoint lines as well, but first we're going to connect to make another trapezoid shape. So back on the inches side, we're going to mark 1/2 inch in from each corner. The 1/2 inch is the tall line between the whole numbers, so now you connect to your top sections. I'm holding the ruler down with multiple fingers and pushing with pressure so it doesn't slide while I'm drawing. The base of the ring pop is a disc. Therefore, the base of the candy is a little bit more rounded, so I'm going to freehand some lines that gradually curve so it looks like the base of the candy is rounded. And then I'm going to erase the straight line I had and clean up any sketch marks that I created. For the disc, you're going to draw from one side of the candy and make an arc all the way to the other side. I like to sketch lightly until I get the shape that I'm looking for, and I can always clean up my lines later. The plastic has a thickness, so don't forget to draw the edge. For the actual ring part, I'm going to use my gross motor movements, so my elbow and my shoulder, to draw a circle. But I'm only going to keep the part that sticks out under the base of the candy. The ring has a split in it so that it can fit on any size finger, more or less. So I'm going to I'm going to erase away the sketch marks that I had used to draw my circle and clean up any sketch marks. I am going to be painting this and eventually outlining it, so you won't see your sketch marks or eraser marks when you're done with this assignment. Try to draw lightly just so you don't leave big gouges in the paper. With watercolor, we're using our primary colors. We're using turquoise, yellow, and magenta. You can make your candy whichever color. I'm loading up my paint first with water, swishing my brush around to dissolve the pigment, and I'm going to paint carefully, one shape at a time, staying in the lines. Painting with watercolor is dragging around a puddle of colorful water, so it's a good opportunity to practice this. You'll notice that I'm skipping a shape because if I paint one shape next to another with watercolor, the colors tend to bleed together, which isn't a problem when you're using just one color to start with, but it's a good habit to get into to not paint right next to wet watercolor. Give it a moment to dry and get absorbed into the paper. So it's okay if the dilution is different, right? So the intensity of the color changes depending on how much water is in the paint tray. So if I touch my bristles to the paint, I will dissolve more of the color into the water and get slightly more intense colors. You don't want your base to be very intense because we are going to learn how to layer colors on top. You're going to paint the base the same way, so whichever color you would like to start with. And then we're going to let this dry. So after it dries, you're going to put washes of the same color over it. So you're not painting the whole shape again, you're just painting triangular or trapezoidal or rhombus shapes. So a corner and two edges is a good way of thinking about this. And when you layer watercolor over the same color, it makes it look more intense. The galaxy effect is simply taking a contrasting color and dropping it with your paintbrush into a wet area of watercolor and letting it dilute. When the paint is completely dry on the ring pop, you're going to outline it with a black permanent marker. You're going to add additional shading and highlights with colored pencil on top of the dry paint, and you may choose to paint the background.